Nu kommer jag och tar dig!
Lawrence, I need your help. I don't know what we do to make this week. No, somewhere good, but I can't do those even though I want to. I haven't watched any horror movies that scared me even a little. I haven't watched 10 that are bad enough to make for an interesting list. No horror game I ever played so far has been any good. I refuse to lower myself to Let's Plays. That could work. A movie won't work, then I'll need lots of footage which I don't have time to get. So a horror game it is, but which one? Oh, those! That might work! But they weren't technically horror games. I suppose. Okay, I'll do it. Hello boys and girls, ghouls and goblins. Today I'm going to review Lucius 1 and 2. There are way too few games where you can play as the villain, so whenever I found one that doesn't seem terrible, I play it. Therefore, as soon as I discovered Lucius, I threw myself over it at once, as well as his sequel, Lucius 2, The Prophecy. I really like both of these games, and for very different reasons. I'm therefore going to review them separately, starting with the first one. Let's start with the premise. You play as Lucius, a 6-year-old boy who is the son of the devil. In order to please your daddy, you have to kill your entire household, from maids to friends of the family to your own parents. And you must do so without anyone figuring out that you are behind it all, or that you are the Antichrist. This game is most certainly inspired by the movie The Omen, judging by some huge similarities. Fun fact, I actually discovered this game the very day after I watched The Omen. I guess it was an omen? The game plays as a puzzle game where you have to find certain items, place them in the right place, weld them together, etc, etc. As you progress you are rewarded by your dad with unholy powers like telekinesis and mind control. Gameplay wise this game is pretty hit and miss depending on your taste. I personally like puzzle games, so I want to feel like I'm making progress. If it takes too long to figure out what to do, I'll lose interest. That and my rejection to the idea of using walkthroughs makes me risk never finishing a game if I get stuck too long. And I got stuck a lot in this game. The puzzles are, at least to me, pretty tricky sometimes. Especially since you might sometimes be doing what you're supposed to do, but you're doing it just a little bit wrong, and therefore you think that it's not what you should do and try something else instead, resulting in you looking in vain for a different solution. Another thing that might confuse players is that the things you'll need in later puzzles are sometimes already present, making you think you're supposed to do something with them in the current puzzle. Another thing that annoyed me a little is that your powers are virtually useless when you aren't supposed to use them for a puzzle. I don't like it when games give you something cool that you can only use when the game wants you to. But despite the puzzle sometimes being frustrating, the game kept my interest with the story. This is the game's greatest strength. It feels like you're playing as a villain in a horror movie. What gives you this feeling is a number of factors. Firstly, the style of the game. The graphics and the music give the game a great atmosphere, and the use of cutscenes is really good. I sometimes see games misuse cutscenes by putting them where they aren't supposed to be. Parts of the games where the player should be controlling the character, and by not being in control they are brought out of the experience. This is a common issue for horror games, which should keep cutscenes to a minimum. But in this game they enhance the experience, helping to deliver the feeling that you're really playing a part in a horror movie. If they weren't made to look like in-game footage, they would look like clips from an actual horror movie. The voice acting in this game is also decent. It ranges from great to not so bad that it breaks the immersion. The narrator of the game, the cop who investigates the murder cases, is one of my two favorites. His acting is really believable, and since he is the character who talks the most, that's a very good thing. My other favorite is Satan. He has a really sinister voice, but it's not a traditional devil voice, but it's still really fitting. Another thing I really like is that each time you complete a puzzle, you are rewarded with a cutscene of someone getting axed off in a brutal way. That's what kept me going when I got stuck. I decided to see the next cutscene. And what makes the cutscenes so satisfying isn't just how violent they are, but also that you get enough time to know the characters to make them feel alive. It feels like you're killing real people. The overall storyline of the game is also pretty engaging, even though it's pretty much a game version of The Omen. I especially love the climax of the game. I won't spoil it, but it was really epic. The music, the settings, everything felt so grand and evil. Overall, Lucius is a very welcome contribution to games where you play as the villain. The graphics are beautiful for an indie game, the music is great, the story and voice acting is great, and the gameplay, while it has its flaws, is enjoyable. And if you're curious about other people's opinions on the game, it got mixed reviews from critics and mostly positive feedback from players. However, a few years later, the sequel for Lucius was released, Lucius 2 The Prophecy, and this one got heavy criticism from both critics and players. People said that it didn't have the same charm as the original and was just a pathetic attempt at a sequel. I, on the other hand, liked it a lot. I can't say for sure if it's better or worse than the first one because they are very different games. I think that's one reason it was met with such negative critique. People were expecting to get Lucius but even more, when really the games aren't even in the same genre. The first is a puzzle game and the other is more of a sandbox with a story. So let's see what makes this game good and bad, both compared to its predecessor and on its own. First off, something I have mixed feelings about is the new cutscenes. Instead of looking like the actual game, they come in the form of animated drawings. This isn't terrible style, but if the developers want to use it, they should have done so from the get-go, because as things are, I really missed cutscenes from the first game. Another thing you'll notice soon after starting the game is that Satan has gotten a huge makeover. He now has horns, something he didn't have in the first game and ironically looks out of place on him, and they also replaced the delightfully sinister voice he had with an extremely generic deep and evil voice. This is a classic case of trying to fix what's not broken. But before getting into much detail, let's take a look at the story. The game starts with some exposition to tell us what has happened since the ending of the last game. We then learn that Lucius has lost his powers for some reason and is a mental patient at a hospital. The cop from the last game is also being persuaded by Satan into helping Lucius, which is seen in a really silly cutscene. It can basically be summed up like this. I don't want to help the devil, I'm Christian.
Oh, it's alright, you can have me anyway.
Okay.
Good, now go.
I know, it was a joke.
You will laugh at my jokes.
The rest of the game is Lucius regaining his powers and trying to escape the hospital and then attempting to fulfill a prophecy from the Bible. And he also discovers that he is not the only son of the devil, having to face off against a rival sibling. Story-wise, this game isn't as good. It doesn't feel like you're in a movie anymore, it just feels like you're playing a game. Though I think the idea of Satan sending his children to fulfill the prophecies about the end of the world from the Bible is actually pretty interesting, especially when the children had to fight each other for their father's attention. We'll talk more about the story in a moment, but first let's take a look at the gameplay. This is where the game has improved the most. Firstly, it no longer plays as a puzzle game and instead gives you much greater freedom. You still have objectives and the game isn't open world, so you can only go to each location once, but other than that you can do pretty much whatever you feel like. And whatever you feel like will most likely include killing people. There are lots of NPCs to kill, as well as ways to kill them. You can throw them down an elevator shaft, throw acid in their face, mind control them into killing each other, incinerate them, the list goes on. And you may now finally use your demon powers as you want instead of the game deciding when and how you use them. Another huge improvement is your powers. They now come in the form of a skill tree while you unlock new abilities by killing people. The tree is divided into mind control, telekinesis and pyromancy, but specializing isn't necessary. As long as you kill enough people, you'll most likely be able to finish the game with all powers unlocked, and they are a lot of fun to use. Sadly, the ability to form huge fireballs from the last game is no longer present. This is of course to make you dependent on your environment, since the game doesn't want you to be able to single-handedly kill people, as that would make things too easy. You will need some kind of help, even if it's something as small as a can of flammable liquid to set on fire with your demon magic. As much as I miss being a fireball-wielding badass, this is a good way to create balance in the game, and it also encourages you to put together Home Alone-style traps to kill your victims. There's a lot more freedom with crafting as well. You can put together homemade time bombs, brew explosive chemicals, and just about everything you need to create your own diabolical traps. However, there are two downsides with the new freedom with how and who to kill. First off, no more satisfying cutscenes. That's a dilemma that all game developers have to face at some point, deciding how much control the player should have. The more control the player has, the more free they are to do what they want, but the more control the developer has, the more cool stuff they can make, like cutscenes, finishing moves and stuff like that. And by giving control to the player, you're taking away control from the developer. So in a way, the deaths aren't as rewarding as in the first game since they aren't pre-made by the developers. I still think it's fun to kill people, but it's not as fun. There's also the other downside. The NPCs don't feel as much as real people. In the first game you were given time to get to know the people you were going to kill, but here, since there are over 100 NPCs and you are constantly moving to a different location, you can't really get to know them at all. So most of them are just empty puppets with the same dialogue and no personality. Therefore it doesn't feel as good to kill them since it doesn't feel like you're killing actual people. The voice acting has also taken a hit. The narrator is still the same guy and he's as good as in the last game, but the generic NPCs are not that great. Sometimes I can also hear them talking to a microphone, and that's very immersion breaking. Now that I'm done talking about the boring NPCs, let's talk about the new unique character, the other son of Satan. I know to talk about him, I'll have to put in a spoiler alert. So the boy in question is Isaac, the main antagonist of the game. And just saying that feels wrong. Part of the beauty of the first game was that Lucius was the main antagonist, but now he's being replaced. But on the other hand, that gives you more of a reason to fight him to regain your title as the main antagonist. You're not defeating a villain for the sake of good, but to prove yourself the better villain. So in that sense, this is a welcome addition. But it would be more welcome if Isaac didn't suck. First off, he has the same generic low-pitched voice as Satan.
You are all so pathetic! Struggling to be worthy of God's love!
It makes me wonder what Lucius sounds like. Maybe that's why he never talks, he knows how stupid that voice sounds. Isaac also has a very basic villain personality. He's full of himself, he thinks everyone else has less worth than him, and he wants to be his daddy's favorite. He also doesn't appear that much, he's mostly built up in exposition, so when he does appear, it's really anticlimactic. The only time I liked him just a little bit was in the game's climax. In the first game, the climax made you feel like a badass. In this game, you also feel like a badass, but the younger brother of an even bigger badass. You feel great and powerful, but also small and weak. Mostly because Isaac got to keep his fireball power that Lucius lost in between the games. Another thing that bothers me is that the environment in the game is nothing compared to the mansion in the first game. That one had a great atmosphere and it felt like a lot of love had gotten into making it. However, since this game is a lot bigger, the areas feel more rushed and less alive. And the open areas like the town doesn't feel as big as it should. Finally, I feel like this game doesn't take itself as serious as the first game. Things like the collectible bobbleheads and the many in-jokes just feel a little too silly for my taste. I know I said a lot of negative things about the game at this point, but I still really enjoy it. The original Lucius is strong story-wise and not as strong gameplay-wise, while Lucius 2 is strong gameplay-wise and not as strong story-wise. This means that the original game is one I will most likely only play once and really enjoy that one playthrough, because once you know the puzzles and the story, it doesn't have much replay value. Lucius 2 on the other hand has lots of replay value. The freedom it offers, the skill tree and the many achievements give you a reason to play it over and over again. And I like both types of games, the one you can just keep playing, as well as those that are more of a movie style type of game. And just like movies, that means I can only really enjoy the experience the first time. Personally, I think the Lucius 2 would have been better if they just went all the way and made it a full sandbox game with no real story, just a big city where you get to kill people. But on the other hand, I want to see where the story is going. It has been established that there are even more children of Satan for Lucius to have some sibling rivalry with, and I also really want to know how the story will end. So, to conclude, both games are great for very different reasons, and neither is for everyone. The upside of that is that the game can attract different types of players. A downside is then of course that since they follow the same story, it might be hard for players to want to follow the story since one of the games might not appeal to them. But personally, I like both and I really hope that there will be a Lucius 3. And as many more games as the developers need to finish the storyline. There we go, how's that, Lawrence? Aww, thank you. So I hope at least you watching this enjoyed the video, and that you will enjoy next week's video. See you then!